Now, Ethiopia's federal government has started attacking Mekelle, the capital city of Tigray region in Ethiopia. This follows the lapse of a 72-hour ultimatum for Tigray leaders to lay down arms. The Ethiopian National Defense Forces' latest operation aims at Tigray militias but does not target heritage sites, places of worship, public facilities, development institutions and residential areas, according to Ethiopia envoy to Kenya, Meles Alem. Brenda Kerubo spoke to him about the conflict.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We really appreciate. Talk to us a little bit about the current conflict. What has led to it, the fighting between the national government as well as the Tigray forces?
As you know, between 2014 and 2018, there were off and on protests across the country because of call for widening political space and improving rule of law, governance, and curtailing political repressions in the country. At the same time, there were debates within the ruling party, EPRDF, for reform. So these two energies augmented and brought about change of leadership within EPRDF, and that is how His Excellency the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, came to office. Immediately after he assumed office, the Prime Minister and his team undertook a raft of reforms that really transform the country. These reforms, among others, include diplomatic reforms, political, economical, and social, among others. If I cite few in every aspect, diplomatically speaking, our neighbors know very much that we were at odds and at loggerheads with Eritrea for over 20 years. There was no war, no peace situations. So the first transformation was rapprochement between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which in a way really paved the way for peace in the Horn of Africa. That really brought a sea of change in this troubled region. Politically speaking, the government took a host of measures to widen the political space, pardon people who were thrown behind the gungan for years, people who were abandoned, who were condemned to death, were pardoned, they joined their families. Dissident political forces, including armed groups, were welcomed to the capital, being invited for peaceful political contestations. Economically, we have taken also a quite good number of measures that really saved Ethiopia from the brink of falling apart. When the Prime Minister was taking these very encouraging reforms, on the other side, the TPLF cliques, which has been in power for over 27 years, were engaged in disrupting the reforms, scuttling the reforms, and undermining the security of the country by working in tandem with other armed groups. In fact, they were engaged and they used every resource at their disposal to undermine the reform by the government. In this case, the government was so much patient and cautious, so humble and patient enough to engage, to persuade and bring on board all those disgruntled elements of the former TPLF leaders. But the patience of the government was taken as weakness. The relentless effort by the Prime Minister to engage these forces by sending elders, religious leaders and prominent figures was not received well. The goodwill was responded by bad will of these people. The two major plunders by the TPLF clique include, they convened elections, which later was labeled as unconstitutional and low and void. They also, distracted the movement of Northern Force Command, which is based in Tigray. The last straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, is the November 4 attack over the Ethiopian National Defense Force based in the Tigray region. They have been in Tigray region for over 20 years to protect the region and the country at large and the people from any threats from any corner. But they were attacked by their own people, by their own colleague, which is a black scar in the history of the country.
People see the latest offensive against the Tigray forces as a punishment because of the latest election that they had. What do you have to say in relation to this?
You know, the government was responding to any acts of intransigence by the TPLF clique through legal frameworks. The latest law enforcing operations in Tigray region has everything to do with three major things. One, it's about ensuring rule of law in the country. Second, it's about restorations of constitutional order. Last but not least, it's about protecting the people of Tigray and Ethiopia at large from spiraling into vicious civil war and conflict.
Amnesty International says it has recorded evidence of alleged massacre of victims. The Tigray forces say they don't have anything to do with this, but there are allegations that the government in Addis Ababa could have something to do in relation to the latest attack.
This is outright falsehood and utter lies by some outlets. If you see into the November 12, 2020 statement by Amnesty International, after talking with people on the ground, it has really unequivocally have shown that the TPLF militias and special forces were responsible for the slow killing and crime against the people. In fact, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission report yesterday also corroborates these assertions and conclusions by Amnesty International. You should not expect the TPLF clique to admit to the wrongdoings that they have made on their own people.
There are also allegations indicating that the national government in Addis Ababa is working closely with the military forces in Eritrea.
Whether it is Eritrea or other neighboring countries, they are sovereign countries and they have nothing to do on the internal affairs of Ethiopia. There is no third party or entity in the law enforcement operations of Ethiopia. It is an internal affairs. You have to bear in mind that the Ethiopian National Defense Forces is known for its profound professionalism and skills. It has the capability to keep its house in order. In fact, if you see its track record, it's a pride of not only Ethiopia, it's a pride of Africa. It has been a very successful peacekeeping force in Rwanda, Burundi, and currently we are working in Somalia under the auspices of IGAD. So there is no need whatsoever for the Ethiopian government to call for support from anywhere, which is treasonous as well.
United Nations has expressed concern about possible war crimes, and it has also called for a ceasefire to allow refugees to safely go to countries such as Sudan. But we heard the Prime Minister say that there should be somewhat of a final offensive, a crucial final offensive that is imminent.
We really appreciate and understand the concerns of the United Nations, other international organizations and partners to call for cessations. But as I said, this is an internal matter. Like any other responsible government, like any other governments, it has the prerogative of keeping law and order in the country. At the same time, it's a prerogative of my government to make sure that its nationals' well-being is kept. In this regard, it's unfortunate there are our people who are displaced, and some of them have fled to neighboring country, the Sudan. But we are following like three-pronged approach. On the one hand, those areas which have been liberated by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces are being resettled again by the residents from those same places. Second, the federal government of Ethiopia has organized a high-powered national steering committee composed of stakeholders and other civic societies to make sure that humanitarian assistance is being provided to uprooted people. Third, we are also working together with international organizations like UN OCHA, ICRC, and other international non-governmental organizations to repatriate our nationals, resettle and rehabilitate. In fact, the other priority will be the focus of the government in rebuilding infrastructures which have been destroyed by fleeing militias of TPLF.
So Ethiopia is home to the African Union, and it's also seen as a symbol of impartiality on the continent. With this latest conflict, do you think Ethiopia remains unshaken? Do you think it will still hold in terms of its peace face that it still has?
I agree with you. I mean, Ethiopia is a country over 100 million populations. It has a very strategic locations in the Horn of Africa. It's a linchpin of peace and stability in these volatile regions. We host over 1 million refugees across Africa. So I will not be surprised if our partners and neighbors are really concerned about the ongoing development in the country. You don't have to forget that this incident is happening in a very limited area of certain regions. The TPLF clique has been also confined to the regional capital, Mekelle. I know, being a capital of the African Union, seat of the United Nations Economic Community of Africa, it is indeed very important for a very strong, stable Ethiopia. We have reached the third level of the law enforcement operations. The first phase was about reorganizing and putting the structure of the Northern Command, which has been very successful. The second phase was about disabling the TPLF clique, which has looted equipment and artillery from government depots and installations. Now we have embarked on the third and last phase of these operations, which is bringing the culprits to the book to face justice. So there will not be any worry for the internationalization of the conflict beyond a certain region.
And finally, Ambassador, what exactly will it take to create peace between the national government and the Tigray forces in northern Ethiopia?
Justice has to be prevailed, and when justice has prevailed, Ethiopia will prevail, and there will be more stability in the Horn of Africa than ever before.
Interesting conversation right there, especially touching on the Horn of Africa regional outlook. Many thanks, Brenda Kerubo. Let's cross over to the world of sports now, where Argentines gathered at the Casa Rosada Presidential Palace in Buenos Aires on Thursday, where the casket of football icon Diego Maradona lay in state, draped in an Argentine flag and his famous number 10